Hi there, Yarn Bestie. Dea here. Welcome to Skein and Tell, the podcast that unravels it all. Grab your hooks, baby. Grab onto your needles and maybe a warm drink, of course, because today we are unraveling the mystery of why our brains are totally hooked on stitching. Today I have a super duper uber duper special guest with me in the house, and that is our precious bestie, aka #1 product developer, aka coolest person that I know, or at least one of the coolest ones. Yes, I know. Aka biggest yarn nerd there is, aka Kat.
Hello, everyone.
Kat from PMP.
Yes.
There she is. Kat, do you know that feeling when you are when you're when you're in the mood, when you're knitting or maybe you're crocheting and you realize that you've, grown roots in the spot that you're sitting in?
Nope, because I have 3 daughters and I would never dream of such a luxury.
Oh my God. But you know what, Kat? You only need one kid to have that luxury taken away from you. Only one.
Yeah, it gets easier, but I believe at some point in my life I actually had some time to sit down and knit for hours at a time. Oh, how I miss those hours. Yeah, without interruption, right? And then realize that half of my day was gone. But that's a long time ago.
Oh my God. It was last year for me. That was the last time I actually had that where I actually could sit down on my couch and just,
the nice cup.
What do I feel like doing? Do I feel like working on this project or that project, or when the house was still clean, because it's not like I don't have the time to do the craft. It's not like there is no time for it. The problem is that that specific time gets filled in with other activities. Like we have to clean the house, we have to put the dishes to wash, we have to so.
Yeah.
But I do remember, the old days. The old days where I could actually sit down and then just kind of get washed away into the knitting. Mm-hmm. And there's actually some pretty cool science pretty much behind why we zone out so much when we are stitching. So today, Kat, I brought you in so that we can both dive into the psychology of stitching and why that repetitive, hook and loop or clicky clack of the needles turns our brain into very, very happy mush.
Yes. So whoever's listening to this episode basically wants some scientific justification for, our yarn addiction, right?
Yes. Don't we all?
Yeah. Just a small reminder: I'm not a psychologist or a neuroscientist or anything.
Yes, disclaimer.
I'm just an experienced knitter.
And we read a lot about this.
Yeah.
I feel like that's also part of our jobs in general, to be very, very informed of what's going on in the yarn world. And I feel like in recent years, there has been so many new discoveries and new scientific approaches to explaining what happens in a person's brain when they actually craft and so forth. So if you're crocheting, if you're curious about crocheting, but if you're also crocheting and you want to know why it feels so darn good, or knitting as well, let's get into it. Let's go.
So there's this thing called your motor cortex. It's like the choreographer of all your movements. Mm-hmm. So when you first learned to knit or crochet, this part of your brain was working overtime. It was really tough to get your fingers to do whatever it was that you actually wanted to do, right?
Yeah, that's true. I remember. It makes a lot of sense because I remember teaching also other people as well to do it, whether it's crochet or knitting. And I'm actually currently teaching Matthias, one of our colleagues, to crochet. And he is just, he's like, how do I do this? And I remember myself as a kid being very frustrated that I couldn't crochet as fast as my grandmother did. Or I remember when I was about 18 when I learned how to knit for the first time, properly. Wow, was I pissed off. And I was like, I really wanted to, but something in my body said, you need to figure this out. But it was very, very frustrating at the beginning. So
I remember I tried to teach my husband to knit, and that was very painful for me to watch. It's like he just couldn't get his fingers to do the movements, and he just didn't. And I was like, no, stop this. This won't work. You won't just break your fingers.
But it's funny because I would love to actually teach Sebastian how to do one of them, because I think he would actually be good at it.
Nice.
But he just refuses.
Yeah.
He refuses to do it. He's like, no, that's your thing. But it will really help you meditate, and it will help you, not zone out, because it's not zoning out, because you're still in your thoughts and you're still focused. Yeah. But it will help your brain exercise a bit. And he's like, I do other stuff for exercising my brain. No, thank you. And I'm like, okay, fine. Okay, so motor cortex has a hard time at the beginning because it's not used to all the movements.
Yeah, but then the cool part is that the more you do the same motions, the more your brain gets used to it and creates these little highways for those signals.
Aww. So it actually,
to understand.
Okay, your brain says, "Oh, we're doing that again." Well, I got you, Basti.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And a nice example is I learned how to knit and crochet from my 2 grannies when I was little. And then during my teenage years, I didn't do any knitting or crocheting. Boys and parties were a lot more interesting. And then,
and men from the highlands of Scotland.
I never met any of those. Damn it. But then I moved to Canada, and I was really bored because my job there wasn't very interesting, and my free time wasn't very interesting either. So I went into a Hobbii.
This is not to say that Canada is not interesting. No,
not Canada.
You just had a boring
life.
My
life there. Well, my boyfriend at the time was to go on exchange at the university there. I was just not having the fun of my life. Anyway, Canada's a beautiful country, but I went they have fantastic crafting stores.
Yes, they do.
So I went into one of those and went by the yarn aisle and thought, why not try that again? So I picked up a skein of yarn and some knitting needles, and I'm sure they did not fit together at all because I didn't know anything about knitting needle size and the yarn that was used at the time. Went home and found a small YouTube video, just a basic video on how to knit and purl. And you know what? It was amazing. I hadn't been doing any of it for 14 years, but my brain just knew exactly. My fingers just knew what to do.
Exactly.
And just 2 stitches in, I was like, oh, that's what it was, how it was working. And that's fantastic that the brain can do that and together with your fingers.
I to back that up, I remember when I was 5 or 6 years old, I had joined this. It was called like a crafting community center activity for children, something like that, right? Where I learned how to do embroidery and I learned how to knit. Not crochet, just embroidery and knit, right? But I was such a small kid. I have very, very few memories of the whole thing that happened there, like the activities that went on. And then when I was 18, and I mean, mind you, this is again after 10 plus years, right? When I've been shown by my aunt how to do it, I kind of remembered how to do it. Yeah. And that's when because I only remembered how to knit. I didn't know how to purl. So I only learned how to purl afterwards when I was 18. But funny enough, right? Because it's like running on a bike. I was going to say it's like riding a bicycle, right?
Exactly.
So even if you don't do it for many, many years, you pick it up, and after a minute or two, then you're like, right.
That's how.
Interesting.
Yes. Exactly.
Our brains are so magical. I mean, it's amazing.
And then suddenly your hands just know that doing the thing without you needing to think about it. That's pretty cool. It's basically why you can watch Netflix, have a conversation with your partner, and knit a hat all at the same time, or at least women can. Sorry for all the men out there.
Oh my God, we're going to get into trouble.
Yeah, no, I'm really bad at multitasking, so it's...
Don't. I actually know somebody in your team even that can actually do several things.
I know. That was just a joke.
Daniel is really good at multitasking. He can, I remember when we go out for Daniel is, by the way, the graphic designer that works in Kat's team, and he's the one in charge of designing the labels and so forth, right? And we go out quite often or we used to. Now my life is not what it was. But we would go out quite often, and he would chat away and do other things and also knit at the same time. And I can also not multitask that well either. So life is a little bit unfair when you think about it, because often I would have a podcast going on. I would knit on a project or crochet on a project, and I would also be chit-chatting with Sebastian. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So in that sense, I can multitask like that. But doing other little small things like holding a cup of tea and walking at the same time, you just goes everywhere, and I get like hand burns all over, and yeah. So okay, so why does stitching make us feel so good? Is it because our brains are little drug factories and stitching kind of like pushes the right buttons?
Well, pretty much, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Nice.
When you're in the zone with your project, your brain is pumping out dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins.
Oh, it's like the holy trinity of happy chemicals, basically.
Yeah, dopamine is that reward feeling. Like when you finish a row and then you get to do that little satisfied knot and want to do another one. Serotonin is your mood booster. It's why you might pick up your project after a rough day.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And then suddenly feel your shoulders drop away from your ears.
Oh, yeah. You're like...
For the first time during the entire day.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I feel it.
Yeah. And endorphins, well, those are your natural painkillers, which explains why so many of us stitch through chronic pain or illness.
Yeah. My grandma does it a lot.
Yeah.
Like she suffers from a lot of arthritis in her knees, and so she can't really walk that much anymore.
Oh, right, yeah.
But she tells me when I crochet, because she crochets so much these days, she tells me she kind of forgets about it. So it's really, really sweet.
So her brain is self-medicating.
Yeah, pretty much. So I knew about the dopamine, actually. I knew about the serotonin kicking in when we stitch, but actually the endorphins part surprised me because I only kind of realized it when she told me this. It's kind of funny, right? Because I feel like that's also a way for us to kind of justify our yarn addiction once again. Maybe we can get the insurance to cover our yarn purchases. Oh no, but it's because my doctor told me that I have to use yarn as a medication from now on. So yes, and the insurance guy's like, let me check if that's in your policy. Yes, it's my doctor who said it. Like, here's the prescription.
Would be perfect excuse towards our husbands why we're buying so much.
Yes, I have to take a hank of hand-dyed unicorns and two threads of kid silk. They have to be taken like together 3 times daily with a hot cup of tea.
Yeah. I think that would be great.
The world in our heads, right? All right. So while our brain is drugged up on these happy chemicals, the trinity of happy chemicals that it releases while we stitch, it makes sense that we kind of zone out sometimes, right? So.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of called the flow state, which sounds fancy, but it basically means that you're in a zone that, where time becomes meaningless.
Yeah.
So flow happens when it's an activity, when an activity is just challenging enough to keep you engaged. So it's that sweet spot where your project is interesting, but not infuriating.
Not making you angry. Exactly.
Right. So scientists say that this state is basically a bit like meditation, where your breathing slows down, your heart rate goes down and evens out.
Yeah. And your mind kind of gets a break from the usual chaos. All right. Well, I call it, yarn meditation for that matter. So all the benefits of traditional meditation, but with a little scarf at the end instead of enlightenment. You get like a scarf instead.
I'll take the scarf.
Yes, too. All right. So, yeah.
So there's this weird paradox with stitching. Your mind can wander and become more focused at the same time.
That's really weird.
Yeah. So it's a bit like giving your brain the perfect balance of structure and freedom. So think about how often you've had an moment while stitching. You're like working on autopilot and suddenly the solution to a problem you've been wrestling with just
appears.
Magically appears.
Yeah. It's true. It really is really funny how your brain can do its own thing, relaxing and meditating, but you're still also inspired and creative at the same time.
Yeah. It's what you would call the cognitive reset. A bit like turning your brain off and on again, just like when the computer freezes. Yes. The world is chaotic and overwhelming, but your stitching creates this little bubble of order. Stitch by stitch, row by row. There's a pattern appearing. There's that's a hard word. Predictability. It's a bit like creating a tiny controllable universe in the middle of our messy lives.
Yeah. Yeah, I personally think that this is probably why so many of us stitch when we're also anxious, because nothing really gives a lot of us so much peace as actually crocheting or knitting. I know a lot of people that are watching us weekly, either on Bingo or live shopping or Craft and Chat or all the other events we're doing, right? That a lot of them write to us like, I'm so happy that, watching when I'm spending time with you guys while I'm crocheting and knitting and just listening to you guys do your little silly thing, because it really helps me stay,
well, that's nice.
Focus. And I've been anxious today, or I've been, depressed, and yeah. So we can't control the world, but we can control the stitches.
Yeah.
Basically powerful stuff, actually.
Yeah. And despite what some non-crafters might think.
Oh, yes.
Bless their hearts.
Bless their hearts, indeed. Yes.
But knitting and crocheting are not mindless activities. Your craft is basically CrossFit for your brain cells.
Exactly.
I mean, if you think about it, when you're following a pattern, you're reading instructions, you're counting, you're visualizing how pieces will fit together later on, you're
making adjustments. Yeah, exactly.
You're trying to problem solve when you all of a sudden realize, oh man, that has gone wrong. There were a couple of stitches too many.
Yeah.
Three.
Or you forgot to increase, and
Oh,
then
that
suddenly,
too.
like, why do I have impair numbers of the stitches? I'm supposed to have 266. Why do I have 247?
Yeah, so it's actually a full mental workout.
Yeah. When you mess it up, that's when the brain really gets the gymnastics going, right? When you're figuring out what went wrong. Okay, let me see. Where did I mess up? Which row was it? Okay, should I frog it? Can I fix it? Can I just frog a little bit and then fix it? Can I, that's when your brain really gets into it. And like we said, bless the hearts of people who think that this is mindless, or it's like, oh, it's a granny activity. I know that. And I love my cousin. I love you so much, Adina. If you're listening to this, I love you so much. But I remember her being a little judgy towards me when I was knitting, because she's super into living a very healthy lifestyle, both mind and body, right? So I know she exercises a lot. She practices reading and doing, nature walk, eats very, very healthy food and all of that. But I feel like she didn't really understand why I sat and I knitted, or I sat and I crocheted to relax my brain. For her, it didn't make sense. So I'm really, really happy that now there's more and more studies that are coming to light and shedding light on this.
Of course, yeah.
Because I feel even though we don't need to justify whatever we decide to do, but I feel like it's really nice to have some science backing us up, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
For many of us, stitching isn't just a hobby, right? It's therapy, and it's also exercising our brain.
Yeah, it's a bit like, it's a mental challenge that keeps our brains nimble and adaptive. It keeps our brains on its toes.
Yeah.
So next time someone gives you that...
what are you doing
you're
there?
You're just knitting. Look, remember that you're basically doing Sudoku with a string.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of doing Sudoku, I'm just doing Sudoku with my little string. No pen, just string. Science is now finally backing this up. Actually, I've found some studies that are showing that crocheting, knitting can significantly reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression. So not only it keeps your mind sharp, which is what we want on the long term, but it also helps reduce the symptoms of anxiety, of depression. And one study found that 81% of people with depression reported feeling happier after knitting. 81%. So if you have 10 people in the room and they're all depressed, 8 of those are going to feel a little bit better after they knit and crochet. That is super, super, super amazing. Yeah. That's better than a lot of medication, actually. That a lot of tests that have been done with a drug, for instance, right? I guess that the only side effect is having an excessive amount of yarn. So,
well, that's too bad.
No. Well,
yeah, and when we're anxious, our thoughts, they often spiral. But stitching gives those racing thoughts somewhere to go. It's like anxiety, Could you hold this yarn for a second? I'm busy counting stitches.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah. And I actually have a recommendation there. I'm currently reading a book called Beyond Anxiety by Martha Beck. I have no relation to her. Like I just read the book and I'm really happy about it.
No endorsement here.
No. But Martha is explaining that anxiety and creativity are actually two parts that cannot exist at the same time. So she says there's a toggle effect in the brain that happens.
Okay.
So, when you're really anxious and you have this thoughts that are spiraling out of control, start doing something creative. Because if you get creative and get into this flow state, you cannot be anxious at the same time. Your brain simply can't do it. And being creative doesn't need to be knitting or stitching. Of course, it's knitting and craft and crocheting and doing embroidery and so on. But it's also painting. It's cooking a new recipe that you've always wanted to cook.
Music playing as well.
Exactly, anything at all. So, and I really like that theory. I really find it interesting. And when you test it, you can thoroughly feel that if you have something. I mean, if I'm knitting just a sweater where it's knitting all the way through, then it won't do me any good. And then I don't have to use my brain because I can just do it with my hands, right?
Yeah.
But as soon as there's a bit of color coming into the game or a lace pattern or anything where I need to concentrate a bit more to be creative, or if I'm painting, then all of a sudden my mind goes in a different place. So you can feel that. I mean, highly recommend the book Beyond Anxiety by Martha Beck.
I believe that is very much true. Yeah. And I know it because I see it at least in at home, right? I see it with Seb. When he gets a little bit anxious or so, he maybe just sits down and starts drawing because he's actually really good at drawing, surprisingly enough. I don't know why he do it more, Seb. If you're listening to us, Seb, I love you. Do it more. He just sits down and starts drawing, and then I can see that, like you said, goes into the flow state. Nothing else matters. Anxiety goes down. It's perfect. It's very
do it
magical.
every day.
Yes.
Do something what you love
every day.
Yes.
And you don't have to be anxious or depressed to do it. It like I said, it just feeds your brain.
Yes.
Exactly. It feeds your brain. So I actually can't tell you how many times I've actually picked up either my knitting needles or my crochet hook when I felt like really crappy. I have like a lot of the times, right? And as you keep working on whatever project you're doing, then already things didn't seem as, dark or dire, or I kind of forgot a little bit about it for a few minutes, and it gives your brain a little bit of a break and a little bit of a moment to really also assess the situation. Is it that dramatic as my brain makes it sometimes? Because that's also another thing that I notice that happens with me when I'm crocheting or knitting. And I have like these thoughts that might make me a little bit upset or angry, and I'm the type of person that really takes on a lot of what other people are feeling. And if, for instance, there's like, bad vibes around in my family, or bad vibes around my friends, or, or one friend is upset, or my mom is upset, or my dad is upset, or somebody's upset in my family, right? I instantly I mirror those feelings so much. I feel there's so much guilt in me, and there's so much like a feeling of I want to help. So a lot of the time I notice that if I sit down and I crochet, I then start to get into that flow state where I'm like realizing, it is not your responsibility to feel this way. It is not, you don't have to feel guilty because this friend is upset or that friend is upset. So it's therapy. It really is therapy, like to give yourself that break.
And sometimes thoughts are just thoughts, right? And that you can realize as well while stitching,
Exactly.
Thoughts are not automatically reality.
Exactly.
So that's
Or what you're thinking doesn't mean exactly what you're thinking doesn't mean that that's what the other person thinks, or you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. So there you have it, bestie. When we stitch, we're basically not just making little, cozy things. We're also giving our brains a spa day. The repetitive motion calms us down. The creative process lifts us up. And the finished project gives us a little like sweet dopamine at the end, like a little nice little hit, basically.
Yeah, and whether you're working through anxiety or just looking for a brain boost, or just trying to survive
a boring meeting.
Yes. Without falling asleep, then Stitching has your back.
Yeah.
And now you even have science to prove it.
Yeah, you do. You do. And there's a lot of papers that actually prove it. So next time somebody asks you why you, I don't know, maybe waste time. Maybe that's a very harsh word to, or like expression to say. But, why are you wasting time knitting or crocheting? Why are you... Just smile to them and say that you're practicing, neuroscience maybe. That usually pretty much shuts them up very quickly.
Right.
So yeah. Thank you, Kat, for joining us.
Thank you
so much for sharing your little insights. I will check the book out from Martha Beck. Seems very, very interesting. And yeah, I mean, before I go, here's a fun fact to basically just drop at your next stitch meeting. Some doctors actually prescribe knitting for anxiety and depression, and this is actually an actual thing. I've Googled it. It's real.
I have the wrong doctor I can hear.
Yes. So actually, technically, when you are shopping next time for yarn, just like we mentioned at the beginning, just count it as a little medical.
Right.
See if your insurance can actually reimburse it.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you, Kat, once again. I love hearing your stories. And yeah, that's all for today. That's all for Stitch and Tell for today. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into our crafty brain, remember to follow our little podcast, leave a review or a comment, or send me a telepathic high five. Or both of us, actually, for that matter. And until next time, keep the stitches flowing, happy chemicals pumping in. And remember, it's not a yarn problem, it's a yarn solution. All right. Love you, bestie. Talk soon. Mwah. Bye.